I wanted to talk about how I used to feel when struggling with OCD. I made a post earlier where I took a photo in the mirror of myself looking in the mirror and thinking about how I feel right now. Now, I used to wake up every day like anyone with any illness, anxiety disorder, anything, whether it's a disease or whether it's mental health. When you look in the mirror, you tend to think, how am I feeling today? Preparing for the day. You look at yourself every day in the mirror when you're brushing your teeth, whatever, doing your hair, and you think that in that moment, you think, how do I feel? How do I look? Am I feeling fit, healthy to some extent? And I used to get in front of that mirror every day, and I used to think to myself, let's speak realistically. I used to think to myself, fucking hell, I hate having OCD. If only I didn't have OCD, my life would be just fine. That was a zero return investment. That got me nowhere. Now, we've all been in that cycle. OCD is like a machine gun in your head that's taxing you straight from the moment you get out of bed. It's hitting you hard. By about midday, I was absolutely exhausted. So that's how it feels every day, particularly with chronic guilt, that you're like judge and executioner in your head, hitting yourself 24/7 in a cycle of chronic guilt and chronic anxiety over and over and over, that's sort of beating you down, okay? Now, I was also somebody who didn't ever want to be somebody who was seen complaining or anything. Before I even started to set up this social media accounts that I do and the presence I have online with social media, I had no interest in being known. I had no interest in being somebody who had lots of followers on Instagram. That life wasn't for me. I wasn't interested in that. I didn't want people's approval. I didn't really want to interact like that. But I realized that unless I did do that, I wouldn't be able to talk about OCD at the one time in history where we've now got this global connection interface with computers where everyone can see what's going on in the world and share things from their mind. So it'd be the perfect way to bring OCD out the dark and put it on the map. Now, every day I used to wake up, look in that mirror and think, this is a mammoth task to overcome. If the likes of Howard Hughes, who was sort of the fifth richest man in the world at the time, had terrible OCD, ended up spending his whole life not leaving his house for numbers of years and completely consumed by contamination OCD primarily. And I thought, how the hell am I going to get out of this when I've now got no outward compulsions and it's all mental? So I thought, this is going to be so hard. But I thought, I'm sure I can do it, because I wasn't thinking like this yesterday. Little did I know how sort of genes get turned on and sort of most likely get turned on and how that all started. I was confident I would overcome this somehow. Now, today, when I'm standing here speaking to you, I'm experiencing no chronic guilt, no chronic anxiety, zero. Intrusive thoughts have lost all intrusiveness. It's the same as somebody who doesn't have OCD. You get sort of just rare intrusive thoughts. What if I jump off this? What if I hit this? Whatever, that come in, but with no intrusive, like a machine gun impact that we all know all too well. Now, I speak pretty bluntly about all this stuff because I think it's key, because otherwise what happens is there's no sort of direct approach to recovery, and it's all very sort of wishy-washy and sort of leave thoughts there. And as you know from this account, we go into great detail about how to unlock that at the root so that it's not chronic guilt and chronic anxiety persisting, because thoughts are thoughts ain't gonna cut it. We know it doesn't. People wish and wish and wish for years, as I did. Oh, when will this go? When will I be able to just forget about this? Just be able to brush this off? That ain't how it works. You've got to get under this with a deeper level of acceptance. Change your life philosophies, change your perspectives, adopt more rational thinking so that it doesn't have that sort of tight grip, chain-like effect inside you, where we know what that feels like. All of us, anyone watching this video knows that feeling. Chronic guilt, chronic anxiety is your sort of baseline state where you're feeling like you're sort of simmering away in cortisol soup, okay? So I knew that, and I was like, no, I must be able to get under this. I'm feeling fine when I don't notice it, but then it's there most of the time, because the second I notice it, like the first second you wake up in the morning and then bang, it comes in like a train. I thought, well, if I can change my perspective, if I wasn't so scared on that, and I saw that the other ones weren't holding me anymore, so the old fears in the past that I'd got over then weren't. So I was like, yes, then if we go through the steps, it's going to release, release, release. And so as I learned and went through those steps of unconditional self-life and other acceptance, that then broke down bit by bit by bit till you get to this position of freedom. Now, there is no OCD thought or fear or scenario from my past or anything that could hold me today in that internally binding like fashion. And I think that's key. Like, look, I'm confident that OCD is most likely got a genetic, is most likely genetic. As much as a lot of people don't want to believe that, realistically it has. You can't cure yourself of OCD, but then you can't notice it when you're in a position of recovery. You can barely tell it's there. So you'll notice it from the odd moment time to time where it tries to catch, but the way you think, it won't hold for maybe for seconds or something like that, and it's fleeting. So because you're always going to experience some trigger at time to time. So I think that's so important to highlight. If anyone sort of injected OCD into anyone's head, they would experience that. It's not a question of weakness. I used to think it was weakness for years. I went to the gym harder and harder, 6-7 times a week, thinking I've got to make myself stronger to get away from this. And then I used to beat myself up thinking, oh, you're such a wimp for thinking like this and not being able to hold this together, and sort of over and over beating myself up. But it's got different angles it comes at people. When I became more accepting and realised, hey, why would it matter even if you were weaker? Why would that matter? It's nowhere says that you have to be strong all the time. It then still came in from different angles that it will try anything. It tries to take, if there's just a little bit of doubt or anything that you think about yourself, boom, it's like that on steroids. So I think that's really important to highlight, because otherwise what happens is, on this journey we've all been in, we tend to think that, oh, it's my fault. How has this happened? Other people don't think like this. If anyone had that most likely genetic component of OCD, they'd feel exactly the way you do, right? I work with people that are very high up people in the military, in SWAT teams, in the police, and they talk to me about OCD, maybe say like our OCD, which has always got an even negative image in the OCD community amongst men, which is like, well, how could you be worried about your wife or your girlfriend to that level? Like, come on, pull yourself together. But they don't understand the genetic component of how OCD operates, right? And those guys are in super dangerous situations. I'll speak to them, and I've had this exact conversation. I've said, what have you been doing today in your job? And I know these people well on a one-to-one basis, and they're telling me some crazy story how they've been in a situation where they've been shot at and nearly killed that day. And I said, how was it? And they said, no anxiety about that whatsoever. I've been worried about this relationship OCD thing throughout the day. Now, just let's put that in perspective. His life's on the line. He's not worried about that. That doesn't bother him. He's not actually anxious about that. Most people would be, but in his mind, he isn't. But he's worried about something relating to relationship OCD. Now, if you told people, oh, I have OCD, they don't understand it, of course they're going to make the mistake of, oh, that's just tidiness, everyone's got it. But even if they do, people don't understand it. People in medical profession don't understand it. OCD specialists usually, not even often, don't understand it to the full extent. So you've got to think about it like, if a person in that scenario is scared, it's obviously not how people think it is, okay? And it's certainly not to do with weakness. And weakness is a funny thing, because people will come in and say, like, you'll have, say, some 18-year-old woman who's very shy in a lot of her life, and she's kept away from all fears, and she describes herself as sort of weak, scared, lets her family down. Go and then do the hardest exposures, overcome everything, has like lived with OCD for 5 or 6 years, dealing with it all herself, done all the work for recovery, through reading and being proactive and doing everything herself, and just become a completely, really confident, still all her usual personality traits she wants to keep, but become really confident, overcoming everything, super brave with it. The way the world works is we label ourselves one thing, say, oh, I'm weak, I'm strong. I could put somebody that you think is really strong in a situation that's difficult, and then they will back out every time, right? So, and especially with exposures like that. Especially with shame attacking exercises. People often say, and I used to say, oh, I'm not scared of anyone's rejection or whatsoever. Yeah, you try the Albert Ellis exercise of walking a banana down the street. Nobody likes that, okay? So it's these things aren't like we think they are. It's the same as how nervous do people get about asking someone out, right? People are hugely nervous about that. Most people don't want to go and speak to someone, even in a bar, even after a few drinks. Often they don't want to, because they're so scared of the rejection of no. But as Albert Ellis said when he went to the Bronx Botanical Gardens and he went and asked out 100 people, he got over that fear in a day. And we've all had that. I used to have that one, not wanting to ask people out initially, thinking, oh, what if I got rejected? It was never a major problem in my life, but it was a problem where we all had that barrier. 99% of people have that barrier. But then I obviously did like Albert Ellis's book said, and I went and spoke to people in the day and so on. And so it would make no difference to me asking someone out, whether I was walking down the street or whatever, because there's no fear there and it makes no difference. And those things, if you asked anyone, oh, just go and speak to that person in the street, they wouldn't like to do that. And they can start small. They could say, like, pick someone who thinks really attractive on the street and go and ask them where the nearest Starbucks is. People don't even want to do that because they think, what if that person thinks I'm trying to chat them up? So they avoid that too. So we do everything to avoid all these situations for fear, this illusionary fear-like state that we think the whole world's there'll be this impending doom on the spot if that were to happen and we got rejected. And it isn't. Actually, getting rejected loads makes you realise that there's nothing to fear, and then you grow more confident. And I think all those things are so key. They are so key because people tend to write themselves off in 1 second, or label themselves in 1 second, or judge themselves in 1 second as a particular type of person, that's the way they're going to be for the rest of their life. That's who they are. They box themselves in. They say, I'm this personality type, this is me, and that's me set for life. That ain't true at all. You can completely change your career, can change who you are in terms of personalities, different features. You can do that. Life is change. Life is adaptation. But we tend to box ourselves in. And that boxing, that constriction, and that rigid black and white thinking is what leads to chronic anxiety and chronic guilt. So we break that down at those core, those roots, so that we don't have a baseline state of that cortisol-like soup, that chronic anxiety and chronic guilt. I'm going to go into a lot more detail covering this in some more of these videos over the next couple of days. I'm going to be back on here doing a lot more YouTubes. Because I think it's really important to do the longer videos instead of just the TikToks, because there's a lot to cover on these topics, and I think you'll all find very helpful, hopefully. Guys, I will see you very soon. Take it easy, guys. See ya.